Welcome to the World Extreme Medicine podcast. My name's Dr. Will Duffin, GP and Medical Director. When you think of extreme medicine, the first thing that jumps to mind might be Everest ER. It might be all helicopters, rope stretchers, ice axes, and bearded blokes in North Face jackets shouting military jargon into crackling radios. Yes, it can be that, but let me tell you that extreme medicine takes many guises. And our great project at WEM is to celebrate the sheer diversity of medics who are out there from all backgrounds, cultures, and walks of life. We celebrate those that are also bold and adventurous in their thought and their spirit, those that choose to follow their own authentic path, not the one that society's neatly laid out for them. And today we have a truly exceptional and unique guest, Dr. Hinemoa Elder. She's our first New Zealander to feature on the podcast and our first psychiatrist. In a previous life, Hinemoa was a children's TV presenter on the Bugs Bunny show, but nowadays she's a mum of 2 grown-up kids and a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist with an interest in traumatic brain injury and forensics. She's a passionate advocate for women in science and an author. She was also a participant in our ocean medicine course in Plymouth back in 2017. And Hinemoa is deeply in touch with her indigenous Maori roots. And today we're exploring some of the themes in her book, Aroha, that was published last year by Penguin Random House, in which she reflects on ancient Maori wisdom. Aroha is an ancient Maori word that means love, compassion, respect, and empathy, values we all seek to embody. And her book is filled with powerful life lessons. January, for many, is a time of rebirth and renewal. Many of us are quietly contemplating how we might find greater contentment and kindness for ourselves, each other, and the world, especially during this pandemic. So I'm sure there will be some insights in this episode that will help you on your path. And this episode's firmly in the domain of self-improvement and well-being. So keep listening to find out why hope won't get you crayfish and why sometimes you have to chew on the shit stick. Trust me, it will all become clear. Hinemoa, kia ora. Welcome to Wemcast.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui. E ngā rauranga tirama, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, Will. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Is that snoring I can hear in the background?
Yes, my Neapolitan Mastiff bear, he's an old gentleman now, and he has a rather loud snore. So yes, if our viewers and listeners can hear snoring, that's the dog.
He's in a deep slumber. I like that. Yeah.
Yes. He's very chill.
And you first came into contact with WEM through the ocean medicine course. I'm sure you have some fond memories of that. Tell us what that was like.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it was wonderful. I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of some of my ancestors, great ocean-going navigators, and one of my dreams is to be doctor on board a double hull waka traveling across the Pacific. So far, I do a lot of waka ama, which is a paddling sport. Haven't been on a double hull waka yet, but that's to come. So that's one of the reasons I went to the ocean medicine course in Plymouth Hoe, and I dug out my my license, my powerboat license, and I was thinking about Ginge Crook, who had to put up with my pathetic efforts on the powerboat to start with. I was not the best student, but yeah, big shout out to Claire Bailey and Nick Carter and Alex Rowe and Nola Moore, all of our wonderful tutors. Catherine Buckland was part of the organising committee, and she took care of us. It was a fantastic course, so I commend it to anyone watching or listening. Very, very practical and useful.
Oh, I'm glad you found it useful. So you've reinvented yourself a few times in your career, and you're a jobbing psychiatrist. You're in clinic today, and you've gone and penned a book. This is your first book. How do you go about writing a book as someone that's not an established author? Where did that all come from?
Yeah, so it came from a number of sources, I suppose. You know, I've been a consultant now for around 16 years, and in the course of my career, having done a PhD and a postdoc looking at Māori ways of thinking in relation to traumatic brain injury, I'd been mulling over this, the cultural silence, if you will, in much of our healthcare system. We know that there are enormous amounts of wisdom and indigenous science which don't always come forward and support our people. There's almost 1 million people who are Māori on the planet right now. And unfortunately, we face massive health inequities across any range of conditions that you care to mention. Our life expectancy remains less than that of non-Māori people. And so in the course of those deliberations, I thought, what part can I play to bring some of these nuggety bits of ancient wisdom in the form of these proverbs, which are nice and short, relatively easy to remember, and they provide a natural key that opens the door to our culture. So I distilled all those elements, and I'd been writing a newspaper column for a while. So I'd had a little bit of practice of non-scientific writing, and that gave me some confidence. And then the editor from the UK publishing house, Penguin Random House, contacted me and said, "Hey, why don't you write a book for us?" So I thought, well, I better get stuck in, and this is what emerged. Yeah.
And here it is. I've got a copy in my hand. It's a lovely little book. I've really enjoyed reading it. And what we're going to do in this episode is I've picked out 10 of my favorite whakataukīs. This is Maori proverbs. There's 52, one for each week of the year, but my top 10, and I'm going to invite Hinemoa to reflect on these, and hopefully you'll find some wisdom, some useful nuggets within this.
Sure. So where do you want to start?
So let's start with number 8. So I'll just read out. Maybe you can read the Maori translation. So first clear the weeds, then plant. Make time for mind weeding.
Yeah. So in our language, in Te Reo Māori, the proverb, the whakataukī, goes like this: E ngaki ana a mua, e toto mai ana a muri. So yes, as you say, first take out the weeds and then plant. And as a psychiatrist, of course, I'm very interested in how I personally and how we collectively might consider the detritus that we carry around in our minds, and thinking of that as the weeds that we from time to time need to think about clearing out. And I've been thinking about this more in the context of COVID. This is the lens through which we are thinking about life, aren't we? All of us right now, in all of our myriad of ways across the globe. And I suppose one of the things I was thinking about was how differently our different governments, our different local, national responses have been to COVID, and some of those things have been based on these assumptions, these ways of approaching a problem at scale, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of our institutions and our infrastructure has been shown to be wanting, and so I think this proverb, this whakataukī, is very relevant in this context, and our leaders need to be robust in making sure that they're weeding out old ways of thinking that actually doesn't serve our communities facing the gnarly problems that COVID has presented us with. So really acting with some kind of swiftness, being decisive, and also communicating differently with the public. Clearing out the weeds is also about clearing out the weeds of how we supposedly communicate science, or we supposedly communicate evidence, which, generally speaking, I think you'd agree, tends to be quite dry, tends to put people off. And our governments have had to rethink that, and some of them have been slower to to really adjust to how to use modern technology. So, for an example, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, here we have a tracer app, which during different periods of the intensity of lockdown, people got better at using it. But as we've shifted into having to be less rigorous, people are not using the tracer app. So again, this theme of hang on, what are the weeds that are growing in our thinking here? Let's get rid of those and refresh so that our actions are based on relevant thinking in the moment.
Yes, you see that in both the context of personal weed removal, and I think lockdown and this pandemic have been a great opportunity where there's less distraction. Perhaps we can't go travel. There's not much going on. We can't go out to restaurants and theaters or whatever you normally do. So it is a time where we can have a bit of time to space and reflection, but also on a societal level. You argue that our politicians, our governments, this is the chance for them to reset things, to start afresh. And there's that great phrase, "Never waste a crisis." There's a better time than any to redefine rethink some of the problems that we're faced with on a societal level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it just illustrates to me that these ways of thinking that very much draw from nature. Our ancestors used the natural world as a way to give lessons and to help people to carry these portable ways of being grounded and coming back to some sort of sense of hang on, how might I work out what to do in a certain situation. So that's how these whakataukī work.
Yes. Can you think of any practical steps? So for listeners who might want to clear some weeds out of their mind, perhaps that's just ideas or things that aren't serving them anymore, things, the beliefs that are misplaced, perhaps. What could you do perhaps to actually do that mind clearing? What kind of practices would help with that?
Yeah, look, I think there's a whole range of things, and it's very personal, isn't it? So one of the things I suggest in the book, and I think can be helpful, is that we all notice at different times of the month, and the Māori calendar is a lunar calendar, so that we notice at different times of the month we have different kind of energy and different resources that are available in the mind, in the heart, in the gut, in the muscles, in the whole being, if you like. So it's about reflecting on what are good days for this kind of sitting quietly, reflecting on habits, reflecting on how do I tend to go about things? How do I respond? We're talking to a lot of people who work in emergency situations, and how do we really reflect in a robust and constructive way about the last situation we were in, the last expedition we were in, what worked, what didn't work? How do we take account of our own sort of personal tendencies? We all have strengths and we all have blinkers. We don't really like to look too closely at the things that we don't tend to do well. But in fact, those are the very weeds, if you like, that we need to attend to. So I would encourage people to reflect on their the good times of the day or the month that naturally they would get into that zone where they're going to be kind to themselves. This is not about being harsh or beating yourself up. We all suffer from high, unrelenting standards. That's the kind of people we are. And recognizing that, and then thinking about, is that really serving me right now? Or could that be putting my work and other people's work at risk?
Yes. One practice I've found very useful, I've been doing for just over a year now, is journaling. And that's just writing some of these thoughts down,
Right.
just putting pen to paper. And I found that very cathartic and very nourishing, because you can read back through your entries on a previous day, and it really gives you a sense of progress and growth. You think, I can't believe I thought that back then, and you identify, you reveal some of these weeds in your mind, and it gives you the opportunity to to plant new thoughts, new ideas that might serve you better. So some of it, what you're doing is gratitude. We're grateful for what you have. So it's very much in the realm of positive psychology, but also there's an element of affirmation in there. You can write down in statements of intent. So I know I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be doing this anymore. Let's start doing this. And then you read back through it, and a journal entry from 3 months ago, and think, oh, I actually did that. I'm doing that now. It's just part of who I am, and it's an amazing sense of progress. So yes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. One other little trick that I've used with some of my registrars and colleagues and PhD students is to set your timer on your phone for 10 minutes and to write solidly for 10 minutes. And if you can't think of the word, just write. I can't think of the word right now, but it's something along the lines of blah, 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 and just continue to write. And that itself is also a very useful practice, because sometimes people get stuck with words and they're like, oh, I'm not sure. Just write. I'm not sure what the right word is, and you'll find a flow. So yeah, great idea. Journaling is a fantastic practice.
Let's look at whakataukī number 15. So this is like the nectar of the flax flower. What does that mean, Hinemoa?
Yeah, me te wai kōrari. So this is about joy in small things. There are elements of nature all around us. For people who live in high rises, there are clouds out the window. The sun comes up and goes down. The moon comes out. There are stars sometimes, even when there's pollution and smog and such things. So there are birds that we see. And our ancestors, our old people, bring us back to that. There's always something in nature that you can focus your mind upon. And I talk in the book about watching some beautiful native birds here called tui. They're the parson bird. They have the little white, they're almost like poi under the throat. And they're great imitators. They're beautiful singers. And they love to drink the nectar from the harakeke flowers, the flax flowers around where I live. And I think it might sound really simple and basic, but actually there's some profound stuff in there. Drawing your mind back to simple beauty in nature it brings us into a humble space. It reminds us, we're just part of this ecosystem. We're part of this interconnected ecosystem of all of the things around us, which was much more the philosophy, the way of life for our old people. Even when I go home to the far north, when people live in the countryside, live beside the ocean, we're much more aware of things like the tide, the weather patterns, because those things influence your survival. So if you, and I know that those of our viewers and listeners who are, extreme medicine people in the conventional sense, and who go up mountains and go into, ravines and come and look after people in tsunamis and earthquakes and things, these practitioners are also exquisitely attuned to signals and clues from nature. That was certainly something from the ocean medicine course too that I was at. People like Noala Moore and swimming in the icy water, that they have a certain subspecialty set of skills around noticing all the clues, help them to survive in those extreme environments. So I think this is a really important one, and I love the fact that you enjoyed this one. It actually also reminded me of some of the research that I've been reading in the COVID setting, and how our world has responded so quickly. Many people will be aware about the changes in the air quality in different parts of the world, changes in the ocean, and also there's some really interesting research about birdsong in the San Francisco Bay Area. So they've been following these birds for many years, and during COVID, no vehicles, very few people around. the bird song has changed. And I love the analogy that the researchers made. They said, look, it's as if these birds in the past, pre-COVID, were having to shout across a crowded pub to their mates. What can you say? Oi, hey, are we staying? Are we going? But now, because it's quieter, they can have a much more eloquent conversation about other issues. Isn't that a great analogy?
That's wonderful.
That's kind of what they've been hearing. And so our planet has had a chance to sort of wake up and reboot.
Yes.
And I hope that our governments, those people of influence, can really push that forward so that we don't go back to the default of pre-COVID, when everyone's vaccinated and when this pandemic is over, that we got to keep thinking about the next pandemic, and also what do we learn from COVID around looking after our planet better? So that's what Hawaii Kōrari is about for me.
I mean, this is what you touched on there for me is the reason that I want to go into wild places, that do expedition and extreme medicine, is to feel more in touch with the natural world. I think ever since the invention of the light bulb, which is a wonderful thing, you've got light whenever you want it, you wake up whenever you want. And also the clock, everything is on the hour at a certain time. When we're completely out of tune with the natural rhythms of the seasons of the day, of the world around us. And I just think it's when you go into these places, when you go into the ocean or into the forest or the mountains, that you strip some of those kind of artificial constructs away, and you really feel the rhythms and the energy of nature. And I think that's not only is that it's important in terms of your own effectiveness and your own survival, that you tune into those cues, but it's also very enriching. And I think it just makes me feel very alive, makes me feel much more part of this planet.
Well, I think there's a natural alignment, isn't there, between people who seek to go into those wilderness areas, into those extreme areas, and Indigenous thinking and Indigenous wisdom, because you're experiencing that profound connectivity under extreme circumstances. So it's almost like, it's a massive loading dose, if you like, of all of that stuff. You can't ignore it. In fact, you have to embrace it. You're forced to embrace it, because that stuff, knowing that, is going to help you to have a successful expedition or a successful rescue mission. And so that's why I think actually, World Extreme Medicine has a really important role at the moment, because there's a community there of people who have had those experiences and who value them, and to help the wider community really understand why that's so vital, that we can't lose that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Let's and of course the joy in small things, for me, that also speaks to the explosion of interest in mindfulness, that the whole movement of mindfulness, of noticing, of being attuned to the details in life, and transforming daily routines into kind of meaningful rituals. And it's just very interesting to see kind of the roots of some of these very widely held practices that are quite ubiquitous across the kind of well-being space in our modern era. The roots of those lay in ancient wisdom like this. And just remind us, Hinemoa, how ancient are these whakataukīs? When did these come to be? When was this all first written?
Yeah, well, look, it's hard to really pinpoint this, but just to give a sort of frame of reference, and maybe just to back up one step before I do that. So we have whakataukī. This is the word for general proverbs where we don't know the originator, but we do have some which we call whakataukī, where we know the person who coined the phrase. And so there are some in the book that are very old. One in particular by one of my tupuna, one of my ancestors, a man called Nuku Tawhiti. We know that he lived in around 750 AD. So we know that many of these come from at least that time.
Yes, and this, so it's an ancient tradition, and is it mostly through the oral tradition that these whakataukis have been passed down? Have they been written as well?
Absolutely. So of course we are an oral culture, and then we were also quick to take up technology such as writing, and now they're written. So the fact that these very, very old sayings and exquisitely delicious little nuggets of thinking have survived means that they've been useful for a long, long time. And now, over recent decades, there's been a movement to encourage people to write whakataukī for now. So one of the women that is included in the book, Whaia Moi Milne, one of our very esteemed leaders from the north, she continues to encourage us to write whakataukī, so we know who the people are who are coining these sayings for the contemporary world, drawing on that tradition. So really, we're part of that line, that lineage of tradition that harks back to ancient times, and that flows through into future generations.
And at the end, Hinemoa is going to tell you how you can write your own whakataukī. We'll come on to that shortly. So whakataukī number 25, the bird that eats the miro berries, theirs is the forest. The bird that consumes knowledge, the world is theirs.
Right, yes. Te manu kai miro, nōna te ngahere, te manu kai mātauranga, nōna te ao. So the bird, the manu, that eats the miro berries, and these are beautiful little red berries from the miro tree, theirs is the world of the forest, of the ngahere. But the bird that eats knowledge, they can know the world. So it's a wonderful, it's a very classic, a very famous whakataukī, this one. And yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of reflections about this. One of the things that I come back to is that, you know, sometimes knowledge is hard to swallow. It's not so easy to, and it's not so palatable. And I think some of the knowledge that we've been acquiring in the context of the COVID pandemic has been tough to really digest, to continue that metaphor, because we've had to adapt to this ongoing interrogation and exploration of what is the nature of this virus, how does it spread, what are the kind of variables, learning about super spreading, learning about new variants, learning about the immunity and the difficulties around which vaccines are going to work and how they're going to work. And there's lots of unknowns. So I think our ancestors are saying a lot of things in this really tightly scripted proverb about what we consume and how we nourish ourselves. You know, it also, I think, speaks to the whole doom scrolling activity that can go on in this day and age. And when we consume a lot of the negative news, it really takes on a life of its own. It's incredibly negative in its influence. And so how we kind of step back from that and go, hang on, what berries am I eating here? Am I eating the kind of nourishing content, or am I veering off and feasting on the kind of the junk food of the social media world? And so yeah, I love the fact that these sorts of proverbs are still so relevant in this very contemporary context.
Yeah, so Hinemoa, I think for me, the miro berry is definitely social media, and I think of, you know, the infinite scroll of Instagram and Facebook, and you think of the content that's on there, and a lot of very kind of craftily placed advertising and just lots of rubbish, really, and it just fills your brain, and it's probably not that nourishing, which is partly why I've kind of disengaged from it quite a lot. But then there's other things that really do nourish you, that really do give you meaningful knowledge. And I think so reading for me, so by having my Kindle next to my bedside table and not my phone, it forces me to perhaps read something a little bit more that's going to serve me better. So and I like the idea of also in the book you talk about chewing knowledge slowly and deliberately, really kind of savoring it, really turning it over in your head. And I think in this age of information abundance, we're constantly being exposed to so many different ideas and thoughts, and they kind of enter our brains and then they leave again. And I think there's a lot to be said for just taking one idea and really mulling it over, really thinking how you can apply that in your own life, reflecting on it, and talking to other people about it, and just riffing off that one thing, and really going deep with that single idea, rather than just being scattergun with all these kind of different thoughts and little parcels of knowledge that fly at us in this modern age.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, let's look at number 27. A true friend is someone who reaches for your hand but touches your heart.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorites. I'll read it in Te Reo Māori. I think it's very beautiful. And even though you can't understand our language, I think people can feel the good vibrations, should we put it like that? Ko te hoa tino pono rawa, ko tira e toro atu ai tona ringa ki tōu. Engari, ka titi kaha ki tō manawa te kōhingihingi. So what that's saying, my modern translation was, Aroha goes straight to your heart. You can feel the in my cultural frame of reference, we call it the wairua, this intuition, if you like, this sense, this other sense that we can have. It's not hearing, it's not smell, it's not taste, it's not vision, it's not physical touch necessarily. It's this deep sense of connection. And one of the reasons I love this whakataukī is that we know who coined it, and it was coined by one of our arguably most extraordinary teachers of proverbial sayings of modern times, a man called Te Wharehuia Milroy, who passed away just a couple of years ago. And I've been lucky enough to be taught by him in total immersion, te reo Māori language, meetings, like a conference, but in a cultural setting. And so when I read that out, when I think about this proverb, I think about him and his incredible legacy, which was to all of us to be to advocate for our language, to advocate for our people, and to share the cultural knowledge that he passed on to us. So it's like a relay race, isn't it? Your teachers, and in medicine and health professions, we all have an extraordinary legacy of teaching and teachers that pass their knowledge on to us. And then our responsibility, of course, is to pass that on to the next generation of health practitioners. So yeah, I love this one so much. And if there's ever a time that perhaps has challenged us to reframe connectivity and friendship, it's this era, isn't it, with social distancing. And it's really highlighted, I think, for everyone that I know, everyone I talk to in my clinics, in a new way, how much we need each other, how much we need connection, how much as we love technology and it enables us to have conversations like this across the world, which is fantastic, we also need face-to-face. We need to share the same air. We need to share the same breath, which is something that we do culturally. You would have seen Māori on YouTube videos or on the news doing the hongi, which is where we share the sacred breath. That's our way of greeting each other. And so during COVID, we were not allowed to do this very precious practice. This was something that was forbidden. And this, as such a precious cultural practice, we really struggled. And what our leaders harked back to was practices around the time of the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918 and 1919, when we faced similar issues. And so we drew on that knowledge and that tenderness, that mutual respect and reciprocity that I think this whakataukī is speaking about, to bring back some of those precious ways to connect with each other without compromising the social distancing that's as part of how we protect each other.
Yes, and being in sequential lockdowns in the UK, that's really brought home the importance of friendships, and that, as you say, that special glue between us that that enriches us so much, and how important it is to stay connected in some form to those our loved ones around us. And we've all been doing that through digital means. But there's also that kind of physical transaction you talk about when you reach out to someone's hand, the act of touch, of proximity, of the breath, of the other senses being activated when you're in the same space as someone. You feel their aura. That is, as a medical professional like you, I also, a lot of my consulting being by telephone now, or by video, I really miss that getting a sense of someone, of getting of feeling their presence, if you like. It's just, the digital means has been a brilliant lifeline, but for me, it's not been a replacement for all those other kind of richer ways that we connect with one another.
That's so true. That's so true. And so I think it has, it's like that old saying too of you only recognize what you've lost, how much you needed it when you've lost it, when it's gone or less available. So again, much like what we were saying about looking after our planet and how the planet has come back, I hope that in the post-COVID-19 era, that we really draw on these experiences and improve the values of our society, and improve, how do we maximize this sense of connection, this sacred experience of other people when we're in close proximity to them. Now we value it at a whole new level, which we didn't before. So sorry, that's my computer making all sorts of terrible noises. Oh,
no worries.
Go away. Who are these people?
Yes, I think
so I love this one. It's very special.
Yes, I think this might be a nice moment to bring in this idea of COVID-19 as a actually, no, let's not do this here. No, we'll edit this bit out, and I'll bring this in another time. Okay, let's okay, Hinemoa, let's move to number 29.
Sure.
So, to forget one's ancestors is to be a brook without a source, a tree without its roots.
Yeah, this is another classic from Te Wharehuia Milroy. And in Te Reo, it goes like this: Ko te maumahara kore. So that's saying without memories of, ki ngā whakapapa of genealogy or mātua tūpuna of your ancestors. E rite ana ki te pūkake awa, kaore ona hiku awa. So it's like a brook without a source. It's like a stream without a spring. Ki te rākau rānei, kaore ona pakiaka, a tree without roots. So I think this is just so powerful when we liken our own experience as humans to other aspects of nature. And this is what our old people do time after time so eloquently, is to remind us, how do things grow in the natural world? How do things flow? We are just like those elements. And when we forget where we're from, I suppose, for me as the only Māori child psychiatrist, I'm faced with, in my work every day, many of our people, because of colonization, don't know so much about where they're from. And so there's a journey of discovery of that as part of their mental health, as part of their overall health, frankly. And I actually think that this is true of not only Māori, but people all around the world, where their experiences of, where am I from? Who are my people? Um, where do I hail from? So much interest in our DNA, ancestry.com, these sorts of aspects intrigue people. And I suppose during COVID and the climate emergency situation, which is growing in its people are growing in their awareness of the impact, and so they want to know more about their origins. And I think this is very, very important in terms of health and well-being, and it's protective.
Yes.
There's lots of research, of course, there's lots of evidence which we do not apply around when people go into nature. There's lots of health benefits. So for me, I extrapolate that to, well, if you can go into nature in the place where you're actually from, this is like that sort of thing on steroids. This is really maximizing the health benefits of
Yeah.
being in nature.
And it's really struck me how in touch with your own cultural heritage you are. And I think that's very rare in this day and age. I certainly don't have anywhere near the same level of knowledge or awareness of my ancestral roots. And I think, that's something we've all lost in the Western world. And I can see the real benefit of, we're standing on the shoulders of those that come before us, and of knowing who those people were, how they lived and what they stood for, really gives you a deeper sense of place and identity in the world. And
Yeah.
I think that's really inspired me to kind of do my homework and work out who my ancestors are, because I really don't know a lot about it. So
Awesome. And I
yeah.
think, for your son,
Yeah.
for your family, for your wider family connections. And I think the other thing that it does powerfully is that it brings back the sense of guardianship about certain special places.
Mm.
So when we learn about our origins hundreds, thousands of years ago, where our people came from, it draws us into the stories of how they came to live in certain parts of the world, the trials and tribulations that they had, we are the survivors of those people. And so I think it draws on a sense of accountability to our relationship with the planet in that way.
Yes. And also this notion that we will be the ancestors one day, and what will our legacy be, and how will we be remembered? And I think that's quite a sobering thought, and sometimes quite morbid when you think about it. We're all going to die, but we have this opportunity, this brief spell of being alive and active in the world, where we can create whatever we want for ourselves and for future generations, and this is our opportunity to seize.
And I talk about that in the book too. And this inviting people to consider their role as ancestors of the future. And I use that clinically. I use that clinically in particular in perinatal mental health, where I'm working with mums and babies and mums and dads and other caregivers, and inviting them to think about how they respond differently to their role as parents, and thinking about baby as an ancestor of the future.
Yeah, how interesting. Yeah, that's a really nice parallel.
Really powerful.
Yeah.
So, we can draw on these stories and these ideas in our clinical practice too.
Yes, I'm sure in the Maori communities that you work in, that must really resonate with those patients. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, whakataukī number 32. My success is not mine alone. It is the success of the collective.
Yeah, this is another real classic. Many people know this one here. It's seen in government policy documents even. So it's a nice one, and I think it's this sense of no one gets there alone is very important and so relevant right now. E harataku toa e te toa takitahi, engari he toa takitini. The takitini is the collective part. So, thinking about our survival as humans on the planet right now, we can't survive alone. We have to survive in groups. And, feel for you guys in the UK right now, because you're right in the thick of it. and the government's having to make some hard calls, necessary calls, in order to protect people. So how we operate as collectives is another major learning, I think, from COVID. And it's also for me about the sense of, well, if we recognize that survival is collective, how do you build that collective trust? And it certainly made me think a lot about how, when we're delivering messages, when the messages about COVID have been delivered, various governments have been better than others about that trusting relationship that they've built. So in Aotearoa, in New Zealand, we had a daily briefing at 1:00 every day from our Prime Minister and Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, who's this fantastic director of health, public health, and just daily, broken record. Here we are, we are visible, we're open for questions. The whole thing was public. So we could all see the press asking questions, asking tricky questions, asking the questions that we were all wondering about. And this was a very powerful strategy in terms of building trust in the relationship. And that's how the message was more effective. And I think we have a lot to learn as scientists, as health practitioners, around how we communicate science. We're really generally pretty awful at it, to be honest. It's dry, it's boring, it turns people off. The language is designed to protect the privileged. So, yes. And one of the key learnings from my trip to Antarctica on the Homeward Bound project at the end of 2019, going onto this voyage with 100 other women from science, from all sorts of disciplines, we all agreed the science itself is necessary but not sufficient. We have to get better at telling the story. If we haven't got a good story, well, you could have the cure for cancer, but if you can't communicate that, really, we're not serving our communities. Yes, we're not absolutely upholding our own duty of care.
Yeah, so it's the idea we explored actually with Professor Beata Kampmann and her colleague at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in a recent live session we did on vaccine confidence. And we were looking at the failure of science to reach so many people in terms of communicating the value of vaccines and as a way out of this pandemic. And it's perhaps the science itself is sound, but it's the messaging around that we need to, and how we communicate. We almost talk down to people. And in medicine, we have this term of lay people, people who are non-medics. It's like it's military and civilians. It's this kind of, you're in the club or you're not, you're kind of somehow a lower life form.
It's a
huge problem.
Yeah, the them and us culture, and it is so ineffective. And we've got lots of evidence that it doesn't work, but we don't always employ that evidence in terms of the translational aspects of the work that people do. And there's also this the kind of rarefication of researchers and research. I work in neuroscience. Neuroscience is super sexy. Everyone's like, oh, can we fund that? But actually, we've already got a hell of a lot of evidence. It's what we do with that evidence and how we demonstrate. Absolutely, that's a key part. So I think that's all in behind this particular whakataukī about collective survival and getting there as a group.
And it's never been more important than now during this pandemic, where we really all need to pull together, don't we? Everyone needs to observe social distancing and all, adhere to the lockdown measures. And we're seeing these kind of certain factions of society who are rebelling against that. And I think it's in some ways it's down to the political will and the messaging from the higher echelons of politics and how they engender that sense of collective success or failure. And it's all of us together that creates that. And for me, this really echoes so there's another proverb from the Stoics, from Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor philosopher from 2000 years ago. And his little aphorism was, what does not benefit the beehive cannot benefit the bee. So this idea that you have to, we're all in it together. You know, we're with this community, global community of human beings, and we have to look out for each other. It's not about our own individual interests, because if we all thought like that, we're doomed.
Indeed. Yeah.
So that's brilliant. And let's look at number 34 now, Hinemoa. So I love this one. This is, and I'd love you to elaborate. Hope won't get you the crayfish.
Yeah. So he mana ko te kaura I kore ai. Kaura is the Māori word for crayfish, and you know I love crayfish. And my son's job at Christmas, he always gets crayfish for the whānau, for the family, for Christmas. So that's delicious. And I suppose, in simple terms, this is about, you know, when you're going to catch crayfish, when you're diving for crayfish, they live in little holes, and so, you know, hoping won't get the crayfish out of the hole and into your basket and home for tea. So you can have all the hope in the world, you can have all sorts of aspirations, but if you don't actually act, if you don't do something, then it's all in vain. So yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of examples of the talk is cheap kind of way of thinking, and thinking about what we all do in different ways. I mean, I attend psychiatric emergencies, unfortunately, several times a week. Many of the people watching and listening are dealing with emergencies on a daily basis. And so we know, look, if you're gonna deal with an emergency, it's about preparation. So if you're gonna catch your koura, your crayfish, whatever that manifestation means for you, a dream of something, a job, some qualification or some experience, then you are going to prepare for that. Why do we act? You know, why do we act only when we know no one else is going to do it? Do we act only when we feel compelled for some reason? It also reminded me of the commentary from the World Health Organization today, from their leadership, saying the world is on the brink of moral failure. So, and I agree with that statement. And so what are we going to do about it? We can have all sorts of fancy words in thinking, but we need to act in a constructive, well-prepared manner in order to ensure that we uphold our moral values. We do make sure that those most in need receive vaccines, not only, as we're seeing so far, you know, countries which are already pretty affluent. So I think there's lots of interesting reflections that underlie that particular.
Yes, I think this is a universal theme within the kind of well-being space as a whole. And I think a lot of, you know, we know what we should be doing, how we should be better, but you know, all those ideas are espoused, but they're very rarely in use. And I really like about this whakataukī is this idea of engaging your own destiny. You have to follow through with that, with action. You can't just think it, you can't just turn it over in your head. You actually have to. You're defined not by what you think or what you are, but actually by what you do. And that is the key, the key here. And I think we all just need to be bolder in our lives. I think we've just got to go and get after it, and we have to be more deliberate, and we've got to choose our own future and not just hope that the right thing will fall into our laps. And it's about being a pilot of your own destiny. Those are the kind of the parts of that really stood out for me, and I think that's really powerful. And January is a great time for us to be finding that kind of direction and really building up this ball of energy that we can then just we can action these ideas.
Yes, totally agree. I think we've got another one of your favorites coming up.
Number 39. This is great. Chew on the shit stick.
Yeah, ngaua te pai hamuti. So literally ngaua is the verb to gnaw, and te pai hamuti is the name for, back in the day, people went to the toilet by sitting on a piece of wood over some sort of cliff or ravine or dip. And that stick was used in the rites of passage of certain of the very highest people training to learn about, the highest kind of ways of thinking and conceptualizing. Back in the day, pre contact with Pākehā people, with European people coming to our country, we had our own universities, we had our own schools of learning about navigation and the stars and the planet and the oceans, all of those things. And so one of the things that the scholars would have to do as part of these rituals would be to chew on this wooden seat, which was pretty filthy. And so you might be thinking, why on earth, what the heck is the lesson here? Well, of course, leadership is about getting down and dirty and not avoiding things that are difficult, unpalatable, ugly. It's about recognizing that there are aspects of life that are really, really tough, and not turning away from that. So essentially, I'm bringing that one forward. That's a good kind of gritty one, right?
It's all about grit, isn't it? And there are definitely times in life where I can think of that proverbial toilet seat. I mean, do you suggest that your listeners, that our listeners, try and chew their kind of soiled toilet seats to develop a little bit more
fortitude?
Yes.
Certainly not. Do not try this at home. This is just to give you a mental picture of some of the difficult things that our ancestors did in order to reach those heights. We're not expected to do such things anymore.
You talked about leadership there, Hinemoa, and I think that is the hallmark of the difference between the good and the great, is that the great leaders of the world are the ones that they will do the difficult things that other people won't, and they will resist the things that other people can't resist. They will do these things. They'll get in amongst it, and they will. It's about pain management. It's about grit, mental fortitude, and I think those are just phenomenally powerful qualities that we that definitely were exemplified in our ancestors, your ancestors, and I'm sure in mine, if I knew anything about them, that we can definitely but well, I suppose the obvious example that springs to mind is the Second World War. I mean, a lot of my ancestors in recent times were fighting in the Somme and in plains above Germany, and they showed immense fortitude. They had to get up in the air and expose themselves to huge risk, and they really were chewing on the shit stick. But what they achieved was, I suppose, the free world that we know now is thanks to a lot of the individual contributions that my ancestors made. So there you go. I've made a quick off the cuff ancestral link. So really,
quite good. Awesome.
Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, number 43.
Yep.
Talking.
Sorry, you carry on.
Yes, talking comes naturally. Silence comes from wisdom.
Nā te iho ko te kōrero. Kōrero is our word for talking. Nā te whakaro nui, it's our phrase for wisdom. Ko te mumu. Mumu is about silence. So this is from Te Wharehuia as well. Beautiful whakataukī from him. Listening is underrated. And so, I like to talk about the building listening skills. We're very familiar with the 3R, the reading, writing, arithmetic, right? Listening, it doesn't get a look in there. But in fact, listening is such an important skill. I was actually talking to my daughter about this today. We don't go through any processes of interrogating our acquiring better listening skills in school. We're lucky, and my upbringing my mother was very attuned to these sorts of things. And certainly when we go into our cultural spaces, marae is a traditional place in our Maori world, you will see the old people listening, and often they look like, as I write in the book, they look like they might be asleep, their eyes are closed, but they're listening intently. And so I tend to ask my patients and their families at some point or another in the journey that we're traveling together to reconsider what's happening with listening within their family, within their wider family system. We're generally used to thinking about listening to people's words. Okay, that's something that we are familiar with. But actually, what I think what this whakataukī is inviting us to do more of is listen to what's behind the words, listen to the emotions behind the words, listen to the intentions and the judgments and the context, the vibe, if you like. Listen to the entirety of the experience, and then listen to yourself about what that is drawing out of you, and think about why that is. So I think there's just so much that we in conventional society that hasn't really come to grips with the power of listening, and you have to be quiet to listen. So that's just one of the reflections I have about that particular whakataukī.
I think that's so it's so important, and I suppose in, like you say, as health workers in that field, the value of, I mean, William Osler famous said, you know, listen to your patient, for they are telling you the
Yes,
diagnosis. And
that's right.
I think the average the time that we give patients to speak before interrupting in the most recent research is it's around 11 seconds. It's no time at all. And I think that what you really speak to there is the power of silence, but this kind of active silence where and you know you're not just attuned to what's going on with the person in front of you, but you're attuned to your own emotional milieu and aware of what responses that evokes in you. And I think that's just such a it sounds so simple, but it's a real skill, it's a real art, isn't it, to be able to do that in an effective way.
Yes, you need to practice it. One
Yeah.
of the things that we do, we have these retreats where we're reclaiming our language, and we're learning most of it. Many of us second language learners, right? So one of the things that we do is we go and we listen to things. We might watch documentaries in our language, and then we'll summarize. So I think a key skill that goes alongside what we're talking about around listening is the skill of summarizing, which as doctors and health practitioners, we find our way there, don't we? I mean, on call, you learn very quickly. You have to summarize to the consultant as a registrar. Otherwise, it gets unpleasant. So we learn very quickly what are the salient points, and you learn that by listening, and listening with an ear that is tuned to not thinking about your response. I think that's one of the other things that happens in our society now, is that people are not listening freely to, as you say, the whole experience. They're listening and thinking about, what am I going to say when this person stops talking, which gets in the way of actually receiving all that data. So long story short, I'm a big advocate for thinking about how you listen to yourself, and the art of summarizing.
Yes, and just to bring up that last thing you said, I think so much of our listening is listening in order to respond. We're concerned with what we're going to say next and how we're going to interject, when and how we're going to interject, not really listening to truly understand. And I think there's a big difference there, isn't there, as you've said.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so final, this is a great one to finish on. Number 49, I love this. This is, if you seek the treasures of the ocean, you'd better get wet.
Yeah, I love this one too. E ki te ai koe nā taonga te mana, me māku koe. If you want to if you seek these treasures inside the ocean, you got to get wet. and so I, as I said, I was in Antarctica at the end of 2019, and we went for a swim. We're in the Antarctic Peninsula, group of 100 women in science. The goal of Homeward Bound is to have 1,000 women scientists go to Antarctica over 10 years. So I was in the 4th cohort, and it really gives you a rude shock getting into the ocean in Antarctica. It's pretty cold, right, as you would imagine.
Yes.
So it really brought home to me the potency of this whakataukī. You've got to act, you've got to get wet, you've got to get involved, you've got to participate. It's not theoretical. Life is not theoretical. And I think, sometimes as medics, as health professionals, we can stand back sometimes and sometimes that's important, but we are protected in all sorts of ways. And there are all sorts of reasons perhaps that keep us from getting more involved. When I was going through medical school, it feels like 1,000 years ago, there were a lot of messages, covert and overt messages. Doctors don't talk to the press. We don't talk about what we do. It's very tightly constrained. There are only certain people who will do that. And there was a sense that wasn't what we should be doing. And I think certainly more and more in the COVID context, we have a duty of care to communicate about the needs of our communities, the diverse needs that they face. And because we have a certain authenticity that comes from advocating for our patients' needs and their families' needs and the community's needs, don't we? And we really can't hide behind any of those things anymore, I don't believe. So that's another good lesson from COVID is, health practitioners, we got to get wet, get involved.
Yes.
Get involved. Yeah.
COVID is just throwing up so many opportunities for growth, isn't it? And I think for me, this is something I want, World Extreme Medicine, that we really want to try and promote, is that idea of just getting out there, getting in amongst it. And, we are an organization that celebrates people that won't just accept the status quo, that won't, that eschew convention. And we know that in the medical kind of sphere, there's just so many, unfortunately, so many people that are trapped perhaps in roles that they're not happy with, and that they feel a bit kind of constrained, and that their role that they're having in healthcare and in life isn't really a true expression of themselves, and they're not really able to unleash their potential. And through the world of extreme medicine, there's just so many different opportunities and avenues that you can go down that can give you that true expression, that greater meaning, where you can make that the contribution that really is the highest contribution that you can make in the world. So that there's just tons of amazing opportunities, whether that is going on an ocean medicine course like Hinemoa, or whether it's going out into the desert or the jungle, whether it's going and volunteering with Médecins Sans Frontières, or just it's just good to know that these opportunities are out there, and you're never stuck.
That's right, and that we all have unique skills to bring to those settings.
Very much so.
I love that that energy and that openness that World Extreme Medicine offers to people. There are plenty of courses that can suit anyone, whether they're sort of at different points in their career. So when people might feel a bit bogged down, they can shift things around and try something different.
Yeah, you can mix it up and dive into the freezing waters of the Antarctic if you wish.
Yes.
So Hinemoa, tell us, the one thing I love about these Aroha is that lots of other ancient teachings, it's very much the ancients are put on a pedestal. They've written these books. I mean, for example, the Bible, the Quran, nobody's going to go and repen either of those great texts. They are untouchable. But the difference with this is that we are those ancestors of the future, that we have the opportunity to write history, and we can write our own Aroha. That's okay. So how can our listeners create their own Aroha? Give us some pointers.
Okay, sure. So at the end of the book, I wondered about people being creative and using their creative talents to write their own whakataukī with aroha for themselves, for their families, for the planet. And so it's very simple. You just take the letters of the word aroha, Aroha. So A, the first A, allow yourself time to stop and take notice for your own pleasure, for your own growth. Stop. Allow yourself to stop. Reflect on your favorite elements of nature. Maybe go back to childhood and think about a special time as a child. Maybe there was a little park near where you grew up, which was a happy place, had a tree, special playground at school, or maybe a river or a lake or by the beach. And just think about the birds there, the clouds, whatever really struck you, the smells of that place. And then organize some words, some phrases about that favorite place, about the images, the most vivid images that come into your mind when you remember it, and write those down. Just have a play with the words. Some people like doing mind maps, or draw a picture if you prefer. That takes you back into that zone. And then H, habits. Think about these phrases and these words that you've conjured up from your memories of nature that's meaningful to you, and think about what they might say about your habits. So if it's the movement of certain leaves in a tree when you were growing up, was that about joyful giggling as a child, or was that about laughter or dancing, or like whatever strikes you about your way of being or your aspiration of being, or a lesson that you feel that nature from that time was trying to teach you. And then the final A of Aroha, apply. Apply this phrase, these group of words, this little poem, if you like. Apply that to your daily life. Think about, that's something I've written for myself about my connection with my past, with the landscape of my childhood, maybe of my ancestors. How do I apply that to my life now? How might I pass that on to my children, or children that I'm involved with their lives, my students, even if you teach younger people. So that's Aroha, Aroha. That's the sort of journey of how you can construct your own whakataukī written by you, with Aroha, this compassion and care and fierce love that you have for yourself, other people, and the planet, Mother Earth.
That is it's truly wonderful, and I think it's just really liberating for people to know that they can create their own whakataukī, their own little rules for living. We're so perhaps constrained by all the quotes that come from people we perceive as wiser than ourselves, from all different parts of society, and we've got a few, I'm sure, committed to memory, but you can write your own that apply to your life, that enshrine your own system of values and the legacy that you want to leave on the world. So it's a creative process, and it's a very practical philosophy. I just think it's been a real pleasure, and I've learned a huge amount from you today, Hinemoa. So thank you so much for your time sharing this ancient Maori wisdom with us today.
You're very welcome. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Have a wonderful day. And it's been great to share this conversation with you.
And just quickly, if people want to learn more about this subject, about Aroha in general, where should they go?
Well, the book is out in the UK, Ebury Press, Penguin Random House. You can get it online. It's on Amazon UK. And there's lots of resources. Actually, if you go on YouTube and have a look at whakataukī, you will find many resources there too.
Hinemoa, thank you.
You're welcome. Ka kite.